Sawadee-ka, welcome to Hot Thai Kitchen. So if you follow me on social media, you will know that I recently moved to a new place, which is very exciting. And as I was packing my kitchen, it came to my attention how many knives I have come to own over the years. So I thought it would be fun and hopefully helpful for me to share with you all the different knives that I own, what I like about them, what I don't like about them. And also, I will share with you a new kitchen gadget that I recently got that helps change my knife storage life forever. It's awesome. So stick around if you want to know how I now keep my knives organized. All right, let's get started. So as you can see, there's a lot here. So I'm going to do this in an order that's going to hopefully make sense. So I'm going to start with the chef's knives, or the knives that I use for regular cooking, like your workhorse knife that you use for most things, okay? And I want to first talk about the very first knife that I bought as a young woman who's getting serious about cooking. It was my biggest purchase I'd ever made, I think, of my entire life up until that point. I spent $150 on two knives. It came as a set, and it was these two. Okay, so the Wusthof set, that is a santoku and a matching paring knife. This one had these little ovals on it that the salesperson told me would prevent food from sticking to the blade as you cut it, which I have found out to not be true, because when I cut potatoes, it still sticks to my blade. So I don't think it does much of anything. But otherwise, it served me well for a very long time. I no longer use it just because over the years I graduated to other knives, but it is in my drawer as sort of like a backup knife when everything else is dirty. So that's my very first knife. It has sentimental value. It came with a paring knife, and this brings me to a point that if you were to own as little knives as possible, these will be the two that I would start with: a regular chef's knife, or like a big knife that you would use for everything, and then a paring knife, a little one that you would use for little things. And then when I went off to culinary school, a really good friend of mine gave me a parting gift, this global knife that you have seen on the show many, many times. So it's a vegetable knife, and it's basically like a little cleaver. I used this as my main chef's knife for the longest time, and it served me really well. It stayed really sharp for a long time. I like that the blade, it's all metal, so it's easy to clean. I guess the difference between a chef's knife where the blade is curved and a knife like this where the blade is flatter is in how you use it. So if you think about it, if the blade is flat, you can do a lot more of like chop, chop, chop like this. You know, like you can just like take, I don't know, a cucumber and go chop, 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 chop like that. But if the blade is curved, then you can do more of the wrist rolling, rocking motion like that. But this one, you can still do the wrist rolling, except the blade doesn't glide as well. And then I went to culinary school, and they give you a full knife set. So this was then the next chef's knife. This is a Messermeister, which the brand isn't on it anymore. I guess it got rubbed off, or it never had a brand on it. Anyway, it's a Messermeister. It's one of those knives, like, it's not fancy. It's something you would give a culinary school student. You know what I mean? It works, it's good, but it's not super fancy. The only problem with this knife is as I use it, I began to like it less and less, because if you notice this bit here, unlike other knives, it has this thick metal heel, I guess. Problem with that is I use this part of the knife the most, right? This is where I cut everything. And then over time, this gets worn off. And now this heel is longer than my blade. I can feel that my blade no longer makes full contact with the board because that heel doesn't wear off at the same rate as the blade does. So I don't really use this knife anymore because of that. I use it sometimes when I need the length of the blade, because it is my longest knife. Like if I wanted to cut, I think I use it to cut like a pan of brownies or something, like an 8-inch pan, then it's like one cut. But otherwise, I don't use it anymore. So now if you're, like, as a tip, if you're looking for a knife and you find one with a heel like that, don't. This next one is basically one that I use most often on the show and most often everyday cooking now. It is my chef's knife as of today. It's from a company called North Arm Knives. It's local to here in Vancouver, and they make really good knives. I mean, it's just a straightforward chef's knife, but this stays sharp. It feels good in my hand. It's got nice weight, and I love the wood handle. I love that it's a local company. They did give this to me for free, but I ended up loving it so much that it's basically what I use now all the time. This next one is my most recent acquisition. Was also sent to me, so I didn't buy this. This video is not sponsored, but this knife was sent to me by a company called the Chef Club, and I think it's a Kickstarter product. It looks really cool. It's this sort of like one piece, and they have different colors. It's fine in a sense that it's sharp, but they designed this to be a lightweight knife, which I personally don't like. It's really light. Like I picked it up and I was like, whoa. And without that weight, it doesn't feel very stable in my hand. Like it's not like I'm gonna cut myself on it, but I'm so used to heavier knives that when I picked this up, it just felt like I'm not grounded. It felt like, I've never adjusted the strength that I use with a knife this light. But it's not expensive, so I guess that's a good thing because good knives tend to be expensive. So you're on a budget, it's good to know like what good knives are out there that's cheaper. This one is a sentimental knife. I think it's a knife that's handmade in Japan. It looks really cool. I barely ever use it because I don't want to ruin it because it looks so cool. My best friend gave this to me a very long time ago, and it has a little Japanese character engraved into the blade. I don't know what that says. If you know what that says, please tell me. And it's just a really cool looking knife. It's very sharp, but as I said, I don't use it because I don't want to mess it up. And then this knife, you may have seen in Hot Thai Kitchen a few times. This is the knife that lives here in Adam's apartment. We don't know where it's from because when Adam moved here, actually we do know where it's from. It's the knife that was left here when Adam moved into this apartment. So we don't know whose knife this actually belongs to. And I use it when I forget to bring my knife. So, it has made an appearance on the show a couple of times. Again, I don't like this heel for the same reason. When it wears off, it's not going to be any good. It desperately needs to be sharpened because Adam doesn't cook, so it just kind of lives here. So there you go. It's the brand is Cleave. Oh, I get it. I see what they did there. Anyway, that's a knife that exists. This is also a knife that exists in my drawer, but I rarely use. My in-laws got us this from, I believe, Costco, but it's really heavy and the blade is really thick. So this was the knife that I realized that I don't like a knife that's too heavy. Like there's too light and then there's too heavy. This is a too heavy. The blade is super thick, which is also not great when you're slicing really delicate things. But anyway, just wanted to show you. So these are like the chef's knives, the one that you would use for most things. Now I want to move on to the specialty knives with specific purposes. So I'm going to go over my specialty knives in order of usefulness. And definitely the most useful specific purpose knife that you should have is a bread knife. So a bread knife is one of those knives where unless you buy an unsliced loaf of bread regularly, it's probably not something you're going to use too often. But when you need it, you need it. And there's really no other knives that can do the kind of job that a good serrated bread knife can do. So this one came with my culinary school knife set. So it's a Messermeister and it's great. Like it's held up really well. I have seen some cheap serrated knife, like from IKEA or like maybe some dollar stores would have it. I will show you what that looks like because Adam has one of those. This is what I don't recommend you get. So this is supposed to be a bread knife and it's serrated, but it's got this like really fine, odd serrated edge, which it will work fine for some things, but when it's a really tough, like crusty bread job, this is not going to do well, and this will wear out really quickly because this piece here is super thin. Okay, so when you are getting yourself a bread knife, make sure you get one that's sturdy and one that has scalloped edges like this. Okay, so the next knife that comes in super handy are paring knives. I briefly mentioned before, they're basically just little knives. And this is something you use to take the green bit off strawberries, or slice little things. Or it's needed sometimes when you need to do really fine detail job and you need to like hold it close to the blade. Like I'm thinking of taking the green bit off of strawberries, where you hold the blade like this and you just kind of like carve it out. So the next one looks kind of like a paring knife. It also came with my culinary school set. This is what they called a peeling knife or a tournée knife. It actually is useful sometimes. It's got this like curved blade, and it's really good for when you want to peel things like this. Like you hold like a thing in your hand and you peel it towards yourself like this. It gives you lots of control, and this curved blade really allows you to do this kind of peeling well. Like in culinary school, we would use this to tournée carrots and potatoes. So basically carve carrots and potatoes into like these 7-sided rugby shapes. It's a ridiculous task. No one does it anymore, but we still do it in culinary school for some odd reason. So this was the knife that you would use for that, to like carve things into shapes. So it has, I feel like I've used it maybe like 2 times on the show doing some strange things I don't remember. Oh, I remember. I use it to peel and devein shrimp. I would use this like sharp edge and curved blade to like dig into the peel of the shrimp in the middle and like go ashwa. This next one is something that I just brought from Thailand. It's I don't even know what the name is for English, but this is a Kiwi brand, which is a famous cheap Thai knife brand. And this is what we call meat kwan. And we only use this for one thing at our house in Thailand, is to take the seeds out of rambutan. If you don't know what a rambutan is, it's a kind of fruit. It's about, this big, and it's got a seed inside that's very, very well attached to the flesh. And so what you would do is like stick this in and carve the seeds out so that then you get the flesh in one piece. So if you imagine lychee, a similar thing, a similar shape, except lychee seeds come loose very easily. But that kind of shape, you would stick the knife in and then just go around it to carve out the seeds. It's got a very specific use. I brought it back because you just never know when you're gonna want like a sharp, pointy, small blade. So I have it. The next one is a boning knife. So this is super useful when you're gonna debone chicken. So you have or carve a chicken. Thing is, the blade is thin, so it allows you to like get into small places. If you try to sort of carve the whole breast of a chicken out with a big chef's knife, it's not as maneuverable. Maneuverability. This has high maneuverability around places, and it's super sharp. So the next knives, I have to say, so this was given to me by a fan of Hot Thai Kitchen. His family makes these knives, and they are, like, I still have some in its package because he gave me a whole bunch of them. And they arrived and I was like, oh, these are, I didn't think much of it. It's like light, inexpensive, little knives. But what I discovered was that over and over again, I use these every single day. Like, it's like the knife that I end up using so often. I was so surprised how much I use them, because not for cooking, but for things like cutting cheese or slicing an apple, or like, I don't know, like cutting, I have a donut and I only want half of it. I would use this knife to cut the donut in half, like little things like that. Because one, it's serrated, so it's really sharp and it does a good job slicing through croissants and things like that are soft and squishy. It's also, and this is key right here, it's light and it's small. So if you're only gonna cut a slice of lime out of a lime and that's all you're gonna do, you don't wanna have to bring out like your chef's knife to do that job. I can just bring this out, slice it, throw it into the dishwasher. I don't have to worry about, hand washing, because I hand wash all my knives. I don't have to worry about washing them. So it's just really convenient. So I have a whole bunch of these, and I just end up using them all the time for all sorts of little things around the house. Okay, next, a cleaver. So a cleaver is very Asian, obviously. This is Asian style, Chinese style cleaver. I don't use this often, and I would definitely say it's not completely necessary unless you make your own ground meat, which in Thailand, most people make our own like ground pork, things like that from whole meat. So in that case, this becomes really important. When it comes to a cleaver, what's important about it is not so much how sharp it is, but how heavy it is. This is what you would use for when you need to go like this, right? Whether it's like quickly slicing a whole chicken breast into slices without having to do this. You just go bam, 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 bam. And also when I make ground pork from whole pieces of pork, you really need sort of the weight and the ability to just like wham. The next 3 knives are somewhat less useful. No, they're definitely yet less useful. So this one I've only used a couple of times. It's called a slicing knife. It's used for making one long slice. So if you want to slice roast ham or a prime rib roast or some sort of a roast that requires the length of the knife so that you don't have to saw back and forth, because when you saw back and forth, you get that uneven edge. It's not pretty, right? I don't really make roast beef or ham very much, so for me, this is not super useful. Most of the time, I just use my chef's knife for that. And I just want to point out the difference too. See how like the slicing knife blade is really thin as opposed to this chef's knife blade where it's quite thick? This is because with the slicing knife, you would never use it like this. You can't, because there's no room for your fingers to go, right? So like this is for this, not for this. And that's why the thickness of the blade becomes an issue, okay? Which brings me to my next least useful knife. I don't believe I have ever used this knife ever before. It came as part of my culinary school knife set. I think they called it a utility knife. I've never used it for anything. Like it doesn't have the blade thickness for me to do this. It's too big to do like little jobs. Like if I wanted to cut like an apple, I would use a paring knife or something. And I'm just not sure why you would do this. I might have used it to like cut open cardboard boxes. But apart from that, I wouldn't recommend you get this unless you have a very specific reason why you'd want something like that. But anyway, it's there. And then finally, this one again, I got as a swag, and it's supposed to be a sandwich knife. I haven't quite figured out why it's a sandwich knife, but I believe what it is like it's got this serrated little bit where you can slice your tomatoes for the sandwich. And then it's got this bit where you can slice the bread, like the actual sandwich, in half. Why there's a hole in here, I'm not entirely sure. I think this bit is supposed to be like mayo knife.
First part cuts through the crust. The second part's sharp and not serrated to cut through the sandwich. That's the sandwich, which is soft. That's my guess. It's
Maybe.
like the front is a starter.
All right, let's move on to how I store my knives. So what I used to do is I would stick my knives, especially ones that I use a lot, that I care about more, in blade guards like this, which is great. And then you can just stick them in a knife drawer, but then when you need to look for a specific knife, you're like having to dig through all the knives, right? So then I discovered this thing. This is a knife organizer. The brand is Joseph, which makes a lot of cool things. I will link to the Amazon link in my kit, which I will link to in the description below. Not sponsored, but this like changed my life. I think I might get another one. So how this works is the bottom part would store your big knife, and you would go every other slot because most of your knives are probably have a handle that's probably too thick. And then for the top part, you put little knives. And now I don't have to, first of all, I no longer have to use the blade guards. Second of all, I see exactly where all my knives are. So now what I do is the knives that I use more, I put in this container. And then everything that I don't really use, I put the blade guard on and I just stick them in a drawer. What I like about this versus the knife block is, one, it goes in your drawer, not taking up precious counter space. Two, especially the wooden knife blocks, you can't clean it, right? So it's sitting there, it's got, I don't know, like years of dust goes in there, bugs go in there, I don't know what goes in there, and you can't see it and you can't clean it. This thing is hollow and you can just wash it out, dry it out. So like, I have never liked wooden knife blocks because of sanitary reasons. It's like, I don't want to stick a thing that's going to touch my food into like a mysterious hole whose condition I cannot see. And that is it. I hope that was helpful. And I know there are knife connoisseurs in the audience right now. So if you are one of them and you want to share what you know about knives that might be useful for other people, or if you can answer questions like, what exactly is this used for? I mean, it's for a sandwich, but how exactly? Do share with us in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed to the show, make sure you do so you don't miss an episode. And click the bell icon as well so you get a notification when I post a new video. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you next time. สวัสดีค่ะ